So, in defining the flow state of the unfamiliar, just a couple thoughts, real quick, on how to get in that space is to first and foremost realize that there has to be a sense of adventure. If you are seeking sameness, then there's going to be that predisposed desire to only experience those things which are familiar to you, which is safety. And even if those things are bad for you, as far as your physical, mental, emotional state, intellectual state, even if those things make you stupid, physically, mentally, and emotionally, you will do them just simply because they are familiar, because we value the familiar so much that it causes us to shift ourselves into places where we have investments that are cost only. So, which is not an investment, it's a waste. So, an investment is simply when you're putting something in to get something out, and ultimately putting something in to get more out. So, consistency over time in investment is going to bring back a return, but there has to be a sense of adventure, because you will just simply put something in for the sake of putting it in, for the experience of putting it in, and never getting anything back. But that's just the way you do it. It's familiar, and it's safe in the fact that you're just used to it. It's not safe in the fact that you're taking a risk. You're not risking anything, you're losing it. There is no risk because you know you're going to lose it. So that defining that flow state, first of all, we have to understand what does not work. So if I'm going to change a movement pattern, I have to first define what is costing me. So if I have a movement pattern or a default pattern in my existence, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, that is causing me to go to a default or into something that is causing over time a deficit or a default or anything that is not bringing me a return, I have to do it. G.I. Joe, it is to know it. I have to define this isn't working. If anything, this is costing me. So if this is not working, or if it's costing me, then I have to define that. I have to understand this why. So I'm not going to continue to do this because it's costing me. So the adventure has to come from the willingness to explore the new. Now, we don't explore the new simply for the new's sake. We don't, it's the person walking around with, you know, a chicken on their head just because that's different. That's really not an advantage, unless you want instant eggs, I guess. But what do we have to do? We have to understand it's just not the adventures of doing something new. It's the adventure of finding that which brings us return. And in different investments, different returns. So I might have a long-term investment of a mobility exercise, an endurance exercise, a strength exercise, intellectual pursuit, long term, which is going to bring those returns to me based on incremental aggregate gains, just the slow build. And then there's the quick returns, the higher risk investments where you're working on a handstand push-up, or you're working on writing a paper or a book, something that is no guarantee, but you're going to hit it hard and see what happens. So there is a certain amount of adventure involved, but the adventure is based on return. So the SEAL Team to fix it is to say, okay, I do this consistently in my life, and the reason I do it is because it's familiar. That's the only return that I get. It's familiar. What cost is that? First of all, it wastes time. Secondly, it gets me into a rut that takes me to the same place. And thirdly, there is no creativity there. If I'm not creating, I'm not living. I'm just simply existing. There has to be creation. And in creation, there has to be risk. There has to be cost. There has to, for, you can't, if I go and trace pictures that have already been drawn, there's no risk there. I'm not experiencing something new. All I'm doing is transferring someone else's creation into my mindset. So there has to be things in my life that I choose to move forward on. And to do that, and to get into that flow state, then I have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I have to be familiar with the unfamiliar. I have to be ready to experience the challenge of creativity. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know how that I'm going to do this. Those are things that's living. So if we constantly drop down into a consistency of sameness, a consistency of familiarity, then that's the difference between survival and thrival. Survival is I'm just going to do, even if it's going to cost me, if it's going to cost me time, even if it's going to cost me effort, even though it's going to cost me experience, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to eat the same. I'm going to drink the same. I'm going to move the same. I'm going to think in the same way, and because I'm familiar with that, even though I'm not getting any return, or even though it's costing me. So that shift first, I think, is the shift of adventure, being willing to move out of the familiar into the unfamiliar. And there has to be a certain percentage of life that is unfamiliar. Meeting new people, doing new things, experiencing different modalities. Just like in an exercise program, if you do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, your body just adapts to it, and there's no gain. There's no sum game. Same thing intellectually. If I read the same book over and over again, now I do read things over and over and listen to them over and over, but not because I don't want to learn anything new. It's because I want to learn new things that I've missed. So there is certain indicators there. I have books that I've gone 5 or 6 times through, and I'm still gleaning because of the depth of the book. But that's creativity. Find new ways to learn, find new ways to think, find new ways to move that are beneficial. So the unfamiliar is not just the unfamiliar in the aspect of freakish or wild. The unfamiliar is the unfamiliar in the aspect of what is it in your life that you're doing consistently that's costing you more than you're receiving. And are you willing to step out of your own bounds, out of your own self-inflicted laws? Are you willing to take tradition and shake it? Are you willing to take your genetic coding and say, we're no longer going to follow these lines? Yeah, I am.